Hey guys, it is Matthew coming at you with my quick story of the job that I only worked for one day. So when I was working at the nonprofit that I was at beforehand, I worked with this guy and he referred me to a temp agency called Aerotech, and some of you guys might know Aerotech, but Aerotech is a pretty big temp agency and they're pretty dysfunctional as well. So in September or October, I started working on getting a job with Aerotech, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but they were not responding to my phone calls. I was going back and forth. It took literally from September until February to land a job with them. So temp agencies are not the fastest. I had to drive and walk to their office in Portland and finally talk to the head honcho who I interviewed with like 3 months before, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you're cool. I could represent you for anything." And then he basically referred me to a guy who wouldn't call me back. So I had to go to them, I had to call them, I had to hound them, and eventually I did land a job at a warehouse, and this warehouse manufactures AC units for Facebook and other huge companies. So they're putting together these huge units that are about 10 by 20, and these units circulate air in Facebook's server houses and very large companies as well as smaller companies. So it seemed okay. The pay was $16.50 an hour. It was a swing shift from 4 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. So yeah, don't do swing shift, guys. Just don't do it. Get a day shift, because you don't want to be finding yourself eating lunch at 12 a.m. So I interview with the swing shift manager, and he likes my interview and gives me the job, and eventually I go to their safety training, and it had a lot to do with their scissor lifts and all of their different equipment that they use to get on the top of these units, as well as all the safety equipment involved. So I do all that. It was very boring. It was about 7 hours of safety training, and I'm there with two other guys. So one guy was about 35, and he had studied biology in college, and he was trying to go full-time at the Portland Zoo, but he was only working at the zoo about 2 days a week, and he really loved it, but nobody at the zoo wanted to retire because they all loved the job. So he and this other guy were going to be working the day shifts, and I was going to be at swing. And so we do the safety training. My first day, I show up around 3 in the afternoon, and I do a bunch of paperwork. It felt very monotonous and redundant, but I finally get the paperwork done by about 9 p.m. in their little lunchroom while everybody else is out there working on the AC units. Finally get that done, and that's all wrapped up, and so it was lunchtime at 9 p.m. at night, which again, just don't do swing shift. Just don't do it. And so I meet my supervisor guy, and the first thing that he had me do was mark down with a Sharpie onto a piece of metal that they were going to cut for the units. And then from there, I was dished off to another guy who walked me around the warehouse, showed me pretty much everything. The warehouse is huge. There's 3 different assembly lines. I was on assembly line A, and I was at the end, so it was supposed to be basically wrapping up the AC units in plastic wrapping and getting them ready for shipment. So he showed me pretty much everything, and this warehouse is dark, it's dreary, it is, the smell and the odor was really off-putting. It's hard to describe what the warehouse smelled like, but from the first instant I could pick it up, and it smelled like burning metal, and I really didn't like that. That was one of the things I really did not like. But I get started on the job. This assistant guy is helping me, showing me how to do the caulking on this job, and so I'm caulking these AC units and really not enjoying it, having to kneel down and just wondering if I could do that for 10 hours, 4 days a week. And so I finally get off of work. Everybody toward the end, toward 2:30 a.m. is kind of doing BS work, and then they just clock out and leave. And so really didn't like my first day, and the next day it's around 3 in the afternoon, and I'm like, okay, I should be leaving for the job right now. But I had an internal struggle with whether or not I wanted to go back to that job even after one day, and eventually I decided to stay home, and it felt really regrettable. It did not feel good. I did not like that fact that I was leaving a job that I had spent, the last 3 to 5 months lining up. I didn't have anything lined up outside of that job, and so there was risk involved. But I did have some side work on the side, teaching math as I continue to do in order to help cover living expenses. And I just straight up didn't like the job. So guess what? I applied to the post office. I do a bunch of research on the post office position that I'm going to be at, which is city carrier assistant in Portland. It's going to be grueling. It's going to be a lot of walking is what I researched, and applied there, got the job, and that chapter is over. So the takeaway from this story is feel free to experiment and try out new jobs, but if you're going to a warehouse and it's a swing shift and you're eating dinner at 12 a.m. midnight and you're having to drink coffee to stay awake and everything is not going well, then don't be afraid to actually leave the job, and even leave after 1 day or 1 week. And that sounds crazy, and it didn't feel great when I did it, but I'm glad that I did, because I'm going to be making in the range of double what I would have made at that warehouse very soon. And so I lost 1 to 2 months of pay, but I'm going to be gaining a shovel that's going to be digging income at about twice the rate. And so really do your research. If you're not satisfied, if you see people, like I was in my lunchroom at the lunchtime, and I sat next to this older guy who was about 35, and I said, hey, how long have you been working here? And he said 10 years. And he looked like trash. He looked like a zombie. He looked like he'd been working at that place for 10 years. And so figure out how those people are putting up with a job like that. If they look like trash, and then you can really easily predict where your career could wind up. Now, I am not a proponent of working a 9 to 5 longer than about 10 years, because in about the span of 10 years, you can procure enough assets through real estate and enough alternative income through online sales so that you really only want to work a 9 to 5 about 5 to 10 years, so that you can protect your passive income construction, and that's about it. So keep that in mind. Research jobs. Don't be afraid to apply to jobs. Don't be afraid to go out there. Just don't work swing shift. Just avoid it. But that is the takeaway. Spend extra time. Spend 2 more months figuring out what a better job would be. Don't be afraid to leave the job after even one day. It felt crazy. It felt like I was letting down those people. But honestly, I would have stayed there for a maximum of maybe 2 to 3 months, and then became a zombie, and then just said screw it, and would have left at that point. So it's better that I left when I did. Those guys were great, but not the track I want to go down. All right, that is my crazy story of working literally one day at a job after spending about 3 months applying for it and interviewing for it. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Until next time, peace.